A pilot's incredible tale of the Iran-Iraq War, the F-14 Tomcat in combat reality. The early years of the Iran-Iraq War were marked by chaos, miscalculation, and an intensity of aerial combat that is poorly understood outside special circles. Among the most persistent myths surrounding this conflict is the belief that the Iran's most advanced combat aircraft, the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, was largely ineffective rather after the 1979 revolution. Popular narratives often suggest that sanctions, purges, and lack of spare parts reduced Iran's Tomcat fleet to a little more than ground relics. The combat account described in the article and in this essay doesn't go through the abstract statistics or patriotic rhetoric, but through a single brutal concrete dogfight, one that exposes the reality of Iranian combat operations in 1980s and forces the reassessment of the F-14's wartime role. The strategic context: Iran's air war in 1980s. When Iraq launched its invasion in September 1980, Iran was in a state of political and institutional upheaval. Yet despite this, the Islamic Republic of Iranian Air Force (IRIAF) found itself carrying the primary burden of national air defense. Iraqi air operations were extensive, frequent, and aggressive. Iranian cities, oil infrastructure, military bases were subjected to repeated strikes. In this environment, Iran's F-14 was not a reserve asset or a prestige symbol. It became core interceptor arm of the country's air defense system. According to the account reference from Iranian F-14 Tomcats units in combat by Tom Cooper and Farzad Bishop, Iranian F-14 crews flew and fought at tempo exceeding that of US Navy and US Air Force Tomcats operation during the Vietnam War. This claim alone, if taken seriously, forces a reconsideration of the idea that Iranian Tomcats were ineffective or marginal. The engagement of 26th of October 1980. On 26th of October 1980, two Iranian Air Force F-14A Tomcats crew by Major Hassin and Captain Akbari intercepted Iraqi aircraft operating outside of Kalat Salih Air Base. Their opponents were Iraqi Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-21 variants are proven and widely used interceptors of Soviet origin. What followed was not a long-range missile exchange or a clean standoff engagement. Instead, the encounter devolved into close-range dogfight shaped by constraints on available weapons and the tactical realities of the moment. The Iranian Tomcats were armed only with AIM-7 Sparrow and AIM-9 Sidewinders. Without access to long-range Phoenix shots, in this engagement the F-14 were forced to a close distance aggressively. This detail matters. It demonstrates that Iranian pilots were not relying on technological intimidation here. They were willing and able to bring a large complex interceptor into a close combat against smaller agile fighters. The kill and the cost. Major Hassan fired an AIM-9 Sidewinder at extremely close range. The missile struck its target almost instantly. The resulting explosion was so violent that Hassan's F-14 flew directly through the fireball. Consequences were immediate and severe. The MiG-21 disintegrated into fragments. Debris struck the F-14's left wing. Engine components ingested foreign material. Fire warnings illuminated the cockpit. The left engine lost power. Missiles mounted on the port shoulder pylon were torn away by blast and debris. This was not superficial damage. Any of these failures could have resulted in the loss of the aircraft. The fact that they occurred simultaneously underscores the violence of the engagement and the fragility of survival in close-range air combat. Survival, control, and command judgment. At this point, the story shifts from aerial victory to command decision making under extreme risk. Captain Akbari suggested landing at Akhwas or Disful, logical choices from a purely aviation standpoint. Major Hassan refused. His reasoning was strategic rather than procedural. Both airfields were vulnerable to imminent Iraqi ground advances. Landing there risked the capture of an F-14 by Iraqi forces. This refusal reveals a crucial truth. By the late 1980s, an Iranian F-15 was not merely an aircraft. It was a strategic asset of national importance. The potential intelligence and propaganda value of a captured Tomcat outweighs the risk of attempting a long return flight in a damaged jet. Hassan's decision to return to Khatami Air Base, even at a loss of abandoning the aircraft over the desert if control was lost, reflects a mindset shaped by total war conditions. Preservation of the aircraft from enemy capture was prioritized over personal safety and even over guaranteed recovery. Engineering reality, the Tomcat survivability. The successful return of the damaged F-14 is much a story about engineering as it is about pilot skill. Passing through a missile-induced fireball, suffering engine damage, losing external stores, and remaining controllable speaks to the structural resilience of the Tomcat's design. This exposed directly challenges the simplified view of an F-14 as a fragile, maintenance-heavy platform unsuitable for sustained combat under adverse conditions. In Iranian service under sanctions and with limited logistical supports, the aircraft demonstrated an ability to absorb damage and remain recoverable. The fact that the aircraft was later repaired and returned to service is perhaps the most understated yet devastating blow to the myth of Iranian incapacity. Repairs Repair implies not only survivability but technical competence, diagnosis, path improvisation, maintenance discipline under wartime pressure. The broader pattern. The article emphasizes that this was not an isolated incident. Iranian F-14 crews repeatedly engaged Iraqi aircraft in large numbers during the early phase of the war. Iraqi pilots, once confronted by Tomcats, often aborted missions or jettisoned ordnance to escape. In the incident described, two additional Iraqi MiGs disengaged after witnessing the engagement, leaving their squadron mates behind. This behavioral pattern, mission abandonment upon the detection of F-14, suggested a psychological as well as tactical defect. The Tomcat functioned not only as weapon platform but as deterrence presence in contested airspace. Reassessing the myth, the persistence of claims that Iran exaggerated its F-14 record or lacked the ability to operate the aircraft effectively stems largely from political assumptions rather than operational evidence. Accounts like Major Hassan's, corroborated by detailed research, force a more uncomfortable conclusion. Iran conducted one of the most intense interceptor campaigns of the late Cold War conditions, under conditions of invasion, isolation, and institutional disruption. This doesn't require accepting every kill claimed uncritically. It doesn't require abandoning the simplistic idea that Iranian Tomcats were grounded, symbolic, or irrelevant. Conclusion: the dogfight of 26 October 1980 is not remarkable because it was dramatic. Air combat often is. It is remarkable because it exposes a reality that contradicts decades of lazy assumptions. It shows Iranian F-14s flying active combat missions, Iranian pilots engaging at close range, not hiding behind technology, strategic judgment exercised under extreme pressure, an aircraft absorbing catastrophic damage and returning home, a damaged jet repaired and returned to combat. This was not propaganda, it was war, experienced firsthand, and it confirms a hard truth in the opening phase of Iran-Iraq War. The F-14 Tomcat was not a relic, not a myth, not a showpiece. It was a working weapon system, flown by crews who understood exactly what was at stake.